Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. I have been practicing law for more than 30 years, and I am not sure I have ever seen a wilder trial day than we had today in the murder trial that we've been covering of Zachary Hughes. Now, Zachary Hughes is accused of murdering Christina Parcell. He didn't know her, but on the morning of October 13th, 2021, she was found with lifeless on the floor of her living room. The killer had stabbed her more than 30 times in the chest and the neck and the face, and then dragged her body into the living room, posed her, according to some witnesses, and surrounded the body with rose petals. So prosecutors spent all last week trying to prove that Zachary Hughes is the person who murdered Christina Parcell. And it's a bizarre concept because Hughes is a Juilliard trained concert pianist with no criminal past. He had never even met Christina Parcell, but the state of South Carolina put on some damning evidence, such as the fact that a black bike, just like the killer used, was loaded into Zack Hughes's truck, and such as DNA found under Christina Parcell's fingernails belonged to Zack Hughes. Again, particularly telling because Zack Hughes had never met Christina Parcell and had never been to her house. He was friends with her ex, John Mello, who was embroiled in a bitter custody battle with her. Now, one thing I want to do, I'm trying to show several different things at once. I want to give everybody a quick description of who is who, basically. When we covered this trial last week, there was one person who wrote, lots of people wrote and said they understood it, but one person said they didn't. I thought, oh my gosh, that is like the worst of the worst for my channel, because that's my whole goal, is to help you understand these cases. So this is called the Rose Petal Murder Trial. Christina Parcell, you see her in the middle. She is the person who was murdered. The person on trial, the man with the, they call it now the ginger hair up in the corner on the left, Zachary Hughes. He is the person alleged to have murdered Christina Parcell. And today he admitted on the stand, yep, I did it. I am the one who murdered Christina Parcell. Now, he was friends. I put relationship question mark when I initially did this because it was kind of vague exactly what relationship he had with John Mello. But today he explained that they were friends, and frankly, surprisingly, not as good of friends as you might think, given what has occurred here. But John Mello was the ex of Christina Parcell, and they shared a child. That's the daughter I put in the middle on the line between John Mello and Christina Parcell. They shared a child, a daughter, and they had a custody dispute. At one point, John Mello took the daughter and went to Italy, and Christina Parcell went through various channels, managed to get the daughter back. She actually never had official custody of the child, as we were told today the guardian ad litem would have testified. But in any event, she actually had the child back in South Carolina, where John and Christina had both lived until he moved to Italy. So Zachary Hughes is on trial. John Mello is the friend who is the ex of Christina Parcell. And the other name you really have to know is Bradley Post, the fiance / boyfriend of Christina Parcell. He is currently charged with and in jail for CSAM allegations. And that relates to children and relates to inappropriate relations. And that's all I'm going to say for YouTube purposes. So he was in a relationship with Christina Parcell, and he was, in fact, the one who found her body lying on the living room floor, and therefore saw that she had been stabbed, called 911. He's the one who did that. He was an obvious early suspect, but police ruled him out for the murder. But as soon as they looked at his phone, they arrested him, and we'll talk more about that. It was, so the prosecution, as I said, spent 4 days presenting all of that evidence. Let me pull that out. And I'll stop that screen because I'm about to show you a video file, and I'm going to share a different screen for that. Sorry, it's a bit confusing, especially for me. So the prosecution, as I said, spent 4 days trying to prove that this is Zachary Hughes' fault. He's the guy, he's the murderer. And the defense gave no opening statement. The defense reserved the right to do that before their case. So what happened at the beginning of trial was the prosecutor got up and said, not much, he's guilty, sat down, and the trial began with very little signposting or explanation to the jury of what exactly was coming. The defense said nothing at all. So we get to the end of the prosecution case and we get a brief but shocking opening statement from the defense. And I'll just play some of this for you and you can hear what's said.
Zack is going to testify because Zack has been waiting for this opportunity to tell a group of people like you what really happened, which is that he took the life of Christina Parcell. And crucially, he's been waiting and wanting to tell you why.
So right up front, the defense comes in and says, that last 4 days you just spent hearing all about how the state believes Zack Hughes murdered Christina Parcell? Yep, he did it. He did it. Wasn't murder, though. It was just a killing. And we're going to hear why he says that. Let's keep going.
So what is murder? Murder is the killing of somebody with malice aforethought. And what is malice? The prosecution told you it's anger. That is madness. And that is a component of it. The definition, though, it is the killing of a person without just cause or excuse. The intentional doing of a wrongful act without just cause or excuse. And I want you to think about those words, that definition, as you listen to the testimony that you're about to hear in this case. The why to the homicide is very important because it gives insight into the person's heart. In this case, you were going to hear that the why was not jealousy or greed or a crime of passion or some other emotion. You're going to hear that Zack did not act like an angry heart like the prosecutor conjectured. You're going to hear that this was not done for money or any other personal gain or benefit, not to help out any kind of friend. You're going to hear that this was done for a just cause. And that's not malice and that's not murder.
So complete shocker of an opening statement. Total surprise. After all the trial evidence had been presented, after the prosecution was moving forward with the assumption that he was not going to admit that he had actually committed the crime, suddenly the defense gets up in their opening right before their case and say, yeah, he did it. We admit it, but it wasn't murder. It wasn't murder because it wasn't done with malice. It was done not for money, not for personal gain, not for benefit, but it was done and not to just help out somebody. This was done for a, quote, just cause. So that is what the defense now is. And in order to make their case, they put Zack Hughes on the stand. Before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit more about the evidence that the jury did not hear, because that became the overriding issue for the entire day. So I'm going to have to pull that out again. Oops. And stop that screen and share another screen. It's complicated tonight, but this is so important and very, very interesting. Okay, where is that script? There it is. Okay, so I want to show you, here is what the defense wanted to argue. They wanted to argue that Zack Hughes was not guilty because he was defending somebody else. He was defending, they say, the daughter of Christina Parcell and the daughter of his friend, John Mello, because he says that there was abuse going on by the mother against her own daughter. And he says that was going on and I needed to protect the daughter. And under South Carolina law, if I am defending someone else, I'm allowed to do that in the same way I'm allowed to defend myself. And I stand in their shoes if I'm defending them. So he said, so let's take a quick look at what that means. In such case, the right to take the life of such assailant upon such unprovoked assault extends to any relative, friend, or bystander who would likewise have the right to take the life of such assailant if such act was necessary to save the person so wrongfully assailed from imminent danger of being murdered by such assailant. So fancy language. Here's what they're saying. If the right to take the life of someone attacking you extends to people who are doing something necessary to save the person, someone being attacked. So if someone's being attacked and you are just helping them, saving their life, then you are not guilty. And that's something that is permitted as a defense under South Carolina law. It's called an alter ego rule, meaning that if you are the person defending someone else, you stand in their shoes. So the court looks at whether or not that person would have been reasonable in defending themselves. And I want to go real quickly to what makes a self-defense under South Carolina law. The defendant has to be without fault, which would mean that in this particular case, the child would be without fault in bringing on the difficulty, and maybe extend also to Zack Hughes would be without fault in bringing on the difficulty, the danger. So the danger that the defendant is saying was true, happened, was to the child. She was 8 years old at the time, and she was at school. That's going to be a really important point that the prosecutor is going to bring up. So the defendant, and in this case, Zack Hughes, the daughter has to be in imminent danger of loss of life or serious bodily injury. So, and the prosecution is going to say, look, the daughter is at school. Even if this is true, she's not in imminent danger of loss of life or bodily injury. She's not even there. So there was absolutely no need for Zack Hughes to get a bike, ride to this person's home, Christina Parcell's home, trick her by bringing roses, as we learned today, and then come into the home and murder her. There's just no reason for this. There's no imminent danger. And the belief that you're in danger has to be reasonable, and there has to be no other probable means of avoiding the danger of losing your life. So if you could easily run away, if the person, I don't know, if the person is tied somewhere and they can't even get to you, and you could easily run away, that would be a means of avoiding it. So those are the kinds of things that the courts look at to make it reasonable, that the person is without fault, in imminent danger. That's the most important here. The belief of imminent danger is reasonable, and there's no other means of avoiding it. So we'll pull that out and stop that screen, and we'll go back to our other one in just a minute. But let me finish talking a little bit about that. So it was an absolute shocker of an opening, as I said, as Zack Hughes admitted that he had killed Christina Parcell, but he said, I had a reason to do it. I was defending this child against abuse by her mother, and I was entitled to do that, and that's why I'm not guilty. So the defense case is mostly going to be something the jury doesn't see. They spent yesterday arguing about it and presenting some evidence, which was not shown on the feed, but which was very helpfully summarized by pretty lies and alibis. And this is what apparently was done. The defense made a proffer. That just means that they offer the evidence not in front of the jury, but to the court. That way it's in the record. The judge is fully aware of it, and then on appeal, the appellate court will know exactly what was available. Apparently, authorities found a massive, I don't mean small, I don't mean a few pictures, massive cache of CSAM in the boyfriend of Christina Parcell's devices. It wasn't completely clear to me whether or not it was also in Christina Parcell's device, but it actually showed Christina Parcell, and it showed Christina Parcell with her daughter. And they were in highly inappropriate poses. The photos included at least one older man. We don't know who that is, but the assumption, given the arrest of Bradley Post, the boyfriend slash fiance, is that maybe it was Post, but we don't know. We don't know who that was. But in essence, the defense wants to say that Christina Parcell and her boyfriend were abusing the daughter not of the person who actually murdered her, not of Zack Hughes, but the daughter of Zack Hughes's friend, John Mello. And that this had been going on since the daughter was 5 years old, and she was 8 now, and that there may be another victim as well. Now, the judge ruled all of this out. This is not allowed to come into the trial. And the reasoning behind that is that this isn't some kind of defensive other, because the person is not there. And while it could be relevant, the prejudicial effect is way higher than the probative effect, what it could actually go to prove. And the reason that the reason that the prejudice matters so much is the jury might decide, we're not going to convict him because we think she frankly deserved it. She needed that. And therefore, we're not going to allow the evidence in, because under our rule of law, that's not how we decide whether someone is guilty. We don't look at whether or not the victim needed it. We looked at whether the defendant was justified in what they did, whether or not they were guilty based on evidence. So the authorities find this material in the possession of Bradley Post. And this is a little bit after the murder, but it's in the course of their investigation. So they find this material, and we don't know exactly how bad it is, but you can probably guess. It's so alarming that even though it's at night, the daughter is asleep. She is currently, because Christina Parcell has been killed, she's still living at her home where she was living before with Christina's sister. The three of them had lived together, but they waste no time. In the night, in the middle of the night, they go and wake the child up and take her out of the home and put her in protective custody right then and there. And they searched Bradley Post's home as well. He did not have children living with him. We don't even know if he had children, but he did have a guest room that had a pink dollhouse, a pink alarm clock, and they found even more devices with yet more inappropriate materials on them. He's also been accused of buggery, which involves animals under South Carolina law. That is particularly chilling since Christina's job was as a vet tech. I am not sure what the details are or whether or not she was involved. We don't know that information. We just heard from the proffer. These are the things the defense said they wanted to put in, wanted to be able to say. So, as I said, the court said, nope, we're not going to let any of that in. This is not imminent danger. We're not going to let that in. So yesterday, this battle over this raged on and on all day long. The poor jury got about 20 minutes. They got this, I think, 7 or 8 minute statement from the defense, the opening statement, and then they heard from one witness for, 20 minutes. And it was investigator Dan Bevel of the sheriff's office. He had testified before, and they wanted to ask him, weren't you the lead investigator with respect to another case connected to this one? But the judge said, no, I'm not going to let you go there. And then they did get in that there was a website. This had already come in really with the prosecution, that somebody was sending around nude photographs of Christina to her neighbors, to her work, places that would be embarrassing for her to be seen. But according to Zack Hughes, who today admitted he was the person sending out these photographs, and he said that he did that as a way to try to get her to stop and maybe stop pursuing custody. He wanted to stop the abuse of the child. So there was an argument about whether or not these were photographs that were just something that maybe her ex had and that he was publishing kind of a revenge thing, or whether or not these were actually photographs of her as an escort, because she used to be an escort and these came from an escort website. So the state talked about, and this witness had talked about, well, he went to the website where supposedly these were, and it directs you to yet another escort website, and he didn't find the pictures on that other escort website. So I did think that maybe the state made an error here when it comes to appeal, because they're implying that Christina Parcell is being harassed for no good reason by her ex, maybe releasing these photographs. That's the implication. And that the angry ex was just trying to get custody, trying to get revenge. It's bolstered by the fact that the website they were looking for ends with spite.com. And so I do think that maybe gives the Zachary Hughes team a little bit more argument that, hey, we had the right to respond to that with proof that this was actually from an escort site, that there's reason to believe that, as opposed to the prosecution's theory, which is these were just photographs taken for her ex, for just as part of their relationship. But this morning, right out of the box, Zachary Hughes himself on the stand. Now, it started out fairly innocuous. He talked about his musical career. His parents gave him piano lessons, and he became a musician by trade. And they gave him piano lessons so he could learn to play hymns at family devotions. He went to Juilliard, said that the year he went, 0.2% of the musicians who applied were actually admitted. He got a scholarship and financial aid there. He was on staff with the Knoxville Symphony as the principal keyboardist for a year. And then he went into the Marine Corps, was out with an injury, and then ended up doing a passion project. He called it playing all of Beethoven's sonatas at a local church. It was interrupted by the disease that shall not be named on YouTube. It was in the middle of that the disease hit, and he decided he would perform outside. That would maybe be a safer way to do it. So he was outside playing the electronic keyboard. He had a performer's permit, so, law-abiding guy. And he was in downtown Greenville, summer 2020, when a man named John Mello introduced himself and said, "This is my daughter, she's 8, and her favorite piece is Claire de Lune. Would you mind playing that for her?" And she was just enraptured throughout. He said, not the typical short attention span, because he taught plenty of music lessons over time. But she was just really wanting to hear this. She was just so interested in it. And John Mello gave him a business card, and Zach emailed him, said, "I actually mistakenly thought he was in the rock and roll world, and maybe we had a connection there," but said he was super charismatic, outgoing. And one time we even went out for my birthday while the daughter was with the mother. We were celebrating my birthday, and John Mello dropped on me these serious, serious concerns he had about his daughter. That whenever his daughter was with Christina Parcell, the mother, he just couldn't rest easy until he got her back. He was terrified about the danger his daughter was in. So in April 2021, the communications between John Mello and Zachary Hughes increased really dramatically. Christina Parcell was trying to get her daughter back, and John Mello was emailing his friend. John Mello by now is in Italy. He's emailing his friend saying, they took the daughter, they came over here, and through the court system, they took the daughter, and she's back in South Carolina with the mother. And he began talking about why he was so concerned. And Zachary Hughes said, "Well, I wanted to be distant from Mello, but, I felt a responsibility to help him because of his daughter, for his daughter's sake." So, and then it gets to this. He says, "In order for you to understand my concerns, I need to tell you about what happened to my oldest adopted sibling, Grace." He came from a pretty large family. He had one brother by his parents and 5 adopted children. The 5 adopted children were from Russia, and that was all we knew until this point. There was a break, there was a fight. Are we going to let this in? Apparently, the judge decided, yes, we are going to let in what happened with the oldest adopted sibling, Grace. And it is fascinating. So let's add a video of, oops, not that. Cancel that. We need to share screen over here. Here we go. Hopefully I'm at the right spot.
I don't say this lightly, but my oldest sister, Grace, was the most evil human being I've ever met in my life. She was 10 when she came into our family. The Russian government didn't tell us much about the kids, so we weren't aware of any, if any, behavioral issues there may have been. I would describe her without reservation as an affectionless psychopath. It wasn't that she was immoral, it was more that she was amoral. She didn't have a sense of right and wrong. Her emotional compass was seemingly non-existent. She was just dead inside. She was a masterful manipulator and deceiver. She could lie at the drop of the hat for reasons that might involve her personal gain or just for the heck of it. She would invent the most absurd, crazy, gruesome stories just to get a reaction out of people. And she could talk about this stuff with the same tone that you might talk about making a sandwich. I've never met someone like this since. And with one exception, I had never even heard someone describe another human being like this. She was literally like a vampire who would just suck the goodness out of other people around her. She could be very emotional, and she would fake these emotions in order to elicit a response in you, a sympathetic response. And if, for instance, you were accusing her of doing something like stealing or hurting one of her siblings, she would weep and just beg you to believe her and say, no, I didn't do it. And then if you would present her with irrefutable proof that we knew you had indeed done this, it was like a mask would just fall off her face. And I mean, she'd just look at you with shark eyes. And no matter how many times we would go through this cycle with her, where she would deceive us and betray our trust and hurt people in our family, she would always reel us back in, because there's something in normal, good people that wants to believe that someone like this can change. You want to believe that, there's redemption for someone like this and that they might change their ways and become a better person. And she knew that. And she would use that in order to ingratiate herself again and regain our trust, only to betray that trust again harder than she had the first time. And this happened dozens of times, and it created an incredible amount of strife in our home. She could manipulate my parents and drive a wedge between them. She was just an incredibly intelligent person and incredibly evil. And having met someone like that, it made me able to understand, and even though I didn't want to, accept the fact that people like this exist, whether you want to believe it or not. And if you trust them, you are only ever going to get hurt by them again. You have to forgive them at some point. And that was a very difficult thing for me to do. It took me years, but eventually I had to accept an apology from this girl that I never got and was never going to get. And I had to do it for myself. But I would never trust her again. And that would be insane, for my own safety or for the safety of others. So this is an experience which I think is somewhat unique. I think most people have not met someone like this. And I mean, we might watch true crime documentaries or things like this, and we know that technically these people are real, but they exist on Netflix or in someone else's lives. And we never once believe that it could be someone we know, or that it could be someone living next door, or that it could be someone that our children play with, or someone we might allow to look after our kids. He kept.
So you will hear echoes of this throughout. He begins to talk about how similar he thinks Christina is to his sister, the most evil person he's known. And he believes Christina is similar to his sister. And you will hear that as a theme throughout. The two become very enmeshed, very intertwined in terms of how he talks about them.
Kept saying, Zach, I know you're not going to believe me. Like, I know this sounds overblown and dramatic, and you probably think I'm exaggerating. And under other circumstances, I would have, because John does, he's a big storyteller. And, when people are talking about their exes, like, everyone thinks their ex is the Antichrist. So, of course, I was sort of predisposed to be biased against what he was telling me, except for the fact that point by point, everything he described about Christina Parcell was exactly the same as my sister Grace. He told me that Christina Parcell was a master manipulator. He said she can lie at the drop of the hat and you'll never know it. He said she was incredibly charming. He said she was incredibly intelligent and talented. He used to say she was smarter than he was, but that her biggest fault was that she was lazy. And she had this arrogance combined with her laziness that was essentially born out of the fact that she knew she never really had to work too hard at anything in life. And she could even sacrifice trust with people and tell them lies that could easily be found out, because ultimately she was completely confident in her ability to reel someone back in, no matter how bad she had burned them before. And he could have been describing Grace to me because I knew this behavior. John had.
So you hear how he talks about this, he talks about his sister. He talks about the way John Mello talks about Christina. And it all becomes a very murky kind of mix as we go through his testimony. Now, Zach says he had never told John Mello about his sister Grace. And that's what made the description John Mello was giving him so shocking because he was describing someone a lot like Zach's sister Grace. They seemed really similar.
I had no idea that I'd had this experience with Grace. And that was the first thing that really raised a huge red flag with me and made me think that despite the fact that he can exaggerate and overblow the truth, and he's often not very believable when you listen to him, I was convinced at that point that he must be describing something true, because no one would know how to describe it so specifically and accurately if they were just making it up. And I was right to believe him.
Okay, and there we have the beginning of Zack Hughes repeatedly violating the court's order. And there's just no two ways about it. He repeatedly talked over and over again about Zack Hughes. Zack Hughes talked about the fact that Christina Parcell was doing something to her daughter. He began to sort of foreshadow it here, hint at it. He said, I was right to believe him. And we're going to hear that echo, I was right, I was right, I was right, throughout this. And saying that he heard about this stuff about Christina and he was right. He was right to believe him, telling the jury, and remember, the judge has said the jury cannot be told about these CSAM allegations. The jury cannot be told about these allegations against Christina Parcell related to her daughter, or about Christina Parcell and specifically her boyfriend, fiance, Brad Post's involvement in that. None of that is to come in. So let's keep listening.
She was an incredibly corrupting influence on anyone around her that she could exert her influence on.
He's still talking about Grace.
Call her a vampire who sucks the goodness out of others. This is an incredibly appropriate metaphor, because that's what vampires do. They're intelligent, they're dead inside, and they eventually kill the people around them unless they find someone who might be useful to them, and then they create a duplicate of themselves that they can control. And this is exactly what Grace would do. So when John was telling me all this, I realized that there was an incredible danger that what Christina Parcell was a future preview of what Mello could potentially become if she was left in this woman's custody and was raised by her.
So just so you know, I've softened, taken out the sound for any references that I could find to the child's name, although it's out in public from the trial.
And the facts have borne out that I was right.
Again.
But
Sustaining. We'll instruct the jury to disregard the last comment.
I discovered a...
Okay, so what's happened now is he's once again said, the facts have borne out that I was right. I thought that she was really dangerous. I thought she was going to be a bad influence. We aren't fully told what or how on the daughter, and facts have borne out that I was right. So, and it draws an objection from the prosecution. You know, you've ruled about this, judge. Time to keep this out. So now this is pretty much a full-fledged statement in violation of what the court had said. So there's just an objection at this time, but it will not be the last. You're going to hear this happen several more times. And as for Grace, she's not even the subject of this case, right? There's all this talk about Grace and Grace equals Christina. None of that is really proven. Grace isn't even an issue in the case, but the judges allowed Zachary Hughes to talk about sort of his motivations and what his reasoning and thinking was, without mentioning specifically the allegations against Brad Post, the boyfriend fiance, or they aren't really allegations because she was deceased, but the suggestions about what Christina Parcell had been involved in. So this is more of a full-fledged violation, but it will not be the last. And so Grace throughout this has been, it's obviously a really fascinating story, but she's not actually involved in this case in any way. She was apparently ultimately pulled out of Zack Hughes's family, and he is going to explain why.
A diary that she had made where she described in detail my parents having their eyes gouged out and dying, and how once my parents were out of the way and dead, she would be able to assume her role as rightful queen of the country. So she just had these psychopathic delusions of violence and grandeur.
So all of this comes in, and because he has said my sister Grace equals Christina Parcell, now there's an issue about whether or not the jury is equating the two. And now Christina Parcell never kept such a diary, never wrote these things, was not the sister of Zack Hughes, but he's now said, to me, they seemed pretty similar, pretty much the same. So at this point in the chronology of what happens in the case, John Mello begins to try to convince Zack Hughes, the man you see on the stand, that Christina Parcell is dangerous. And Mello starts with the nude photos we talked about. Now, the prosecution says, well, those may just have been sweet pictures that were made for her husband when they were married. And Hughes is for sure not buying that. He believes they were from a previous career as an escort.
They were not cute, sexy, intimate photographs that someone might send to someone they're dating or something. They were lewd and tasteless, and there was a very clear element of advertising, a commercial element. So when I looked at these, there was a vacant, arrogant, almost derisive look in her eyes that reminded me so much of my sister.
Okay, and it just starts to get creepy how much he is seeing Grace, the sister, and not Christina, just in my view. And now he's about to violate the court's order again, calling the decedent's boyfriend a word which I'll redact, but which sort of rhymes with the first part of credible and the second part of bibliophile.
Given the extremely grave nature of John's concerns for his daughter, especially while she was in the custody of her mother, Christina Parcell, and potentially being exposed to her mother's boyfriend, Brad Post, who John believed was and is a...
Objection. Sustained. I instruct you to totally disregard the last comments made by this defendant.
John asked...
Okay, let's stop there. So the judge tried probably the first line of defense. Maybe the first line of defense would be sustaining the objection, but the second line of defense is telling the jury, disregard this. Now, the problem with that is it's really hard in practical terms to forget things. When someone mentions the words pink elephant, it's really hard not to conjure up an image of a pink elephant. It's just natural. So when people hear these things, they have that in their head. You can't just erase it. So they will try very, very hard to follow the judge's instructions, but it's not all that easy. So, but you are not going to believe what Zachary Hughes says next, because it is about to cause an arrest today, this very day, in the middle of trial. The prosecutors went out and arrested somebody else based on this testimony right here that you are about to hear from Zack Hughes.
Asked me,
John Mello asked
that
him,
if I believed his daughter was in grave danger, would I be willing to kill Christina Parcell for $5,000?
What did you say when he asked you that?
I was shocked and insulted by the request, and I gave him an immediate and unequivocal no.
but then Mello upped the offer, according to what Zack Hughes testified today.
He asked me again, if I became convinced that his daughter was in danger, would I be willing to kill Christina Parcell for $10,000?
What did you, or how did you respond to that offer?
I told him, John, there's no amount of money that would ever tempt me to do something like this. And I told him I was insulted that he even thought that would be something I would consider.
That's something
So
you
I
do
told
for
him I would
free.
never do something like this for money. I told him the only way I would ever consider taking action like this is if I was absolutely convinced that his daughter was not only in danger, but that the only way to rescue her from that danger would be to take Christina Parcell's life.
Now, he offered that he did try some other options. He didn't just go straight to murder. There were some other things he tried, like he sent mailers with nude photographs of Christina to her neighbors, because obviously that would stop her from what she was doing. Or his theory was maybe she would give up on the pursuit of custody and the little girl would be left alone. Now, he also talked about the fact that he went to the DSS, which is basically Child Protective Services in South Carolina, and asked them to do something. They didn't. He said he wasn't surprised at all. And we're back to Grace. We are back to the situation with the sister Grace, because he said he had a similar experience years ago when his family went to the state of Virginia about his sister Grace.
And when I discovered the journal, I had mentioned before about Grace's plans to murder my family. We called DSS and asked for her to be taken out of the home. And they did this. And after a few weeks of hearing Grace's stories and lies, they took her side. They failed to recognize what they were dealing with her. And they tried to have my parents put in jail and the rest of me and my siblings put in foster care. And we eventually had to sue them. And it was about a 2-year-long court battle.
So we're about to hear another direct violation of the court's ruling that nothing is going to come in about the CSAM.
And since June, when I had returned, I had been absolutely convinced that Christina Parcell was abusing her daughter.
So we're going to play that back a few times. I'm not sure what exactly the prosecutor said. I would like your opinion in the chat. I'd like you to write out what exactly you said. One thing you can tell for sure, the prosecutor is really, really upset. And so I'm going to play that back a few times. Jim Pepper sent this sent a clip to me. I was not able to get her email. I don't know why that didn't come through, but I did see her comment in the chat earlier. I knew exactly what she was talking about. So you tell me, what do you think the prosecutor is saying?
Let's go. Abusing her daughter. Abusing her daughter. Abusing her daughter.
So I don't know. By the way, the little pause you hear, I deleted a section, a word. I deleted a word for, tube purposes. So it's another clear violation. And he talks about another thing he did other than resort to murder. He's trying to say, look, I did everything I could. I called Child Protective Services, but he's about to admit to another crime right here. Give it just a second.
I made a phone call to Child Protective Services, and I told them that I was a neighbor. So I told them that I had seen being verbally and physically abused by her mother. And again, I made that up. That's not true. But I said it because I wanted to give an opportunity to have FaceTime in person with an agent from DSS away from her mother, where she could tell them that her mother was abusing her.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's like,
Sustained. You are to disregard.
so the judge is trying some, what frankly in the scheme of law are pretty lame curative instructions. And I don't mean that the judge is being lame. I mean, the whole concept of curative instructions is kind of lame because it's really hard to get that out of the jury's head. When they've heard that, they've heard it. It doesn't just pluck the idea out. It isn't as if it doesn't exist. But the judge is going to try, and he's going to be very specific with them that they should disregard what they've been hearing.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as I stated at the outset of this trial, I am the sole judge of the law in the case, while you, the jury, sit as the judge of the facts. And part of my role is to make determinations about what evidence can and cannot be admitted and presented to you, the jury. The gatekeeping role rests solely with me, the judge on the law, and I want to instruct you that you're not to consider any testimony that I have instructed you to disregard. Furthermore, you should not even mention or discuss any testimony that I've instructed you to disregard, and I instruct you not to discuss any topics that have been ruled improper when you go to do your deliberation room, okay?
So the judge really deserves some major credit here. He is impossibly calm and unflappable as this chaos swirls around him. Next, we get some absolutely unheard of testimony for a criminal trial. But we also are going to find out Zack Hughes is not through violating the court's order, and not by a long shot. So we'll keep listening.
Did you take Christina Parcell's life on October the 13th?
Yes, because I believed it was absolutely necessary to save her. And I was right.
Objection, Your Honor. Sustained. I ask you to disregard the testimony that you just heard.
So there are long pauses through the day when I presume some of them we knew about, some of them we didn't, where there are discussions with the judge. And I think that the lawyers constantly are, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? The prosecution saying this has to stop, and long breaks where this is discussed. He admits now, though, that he not only committed the crime, but that he premeditated it.
I had been wrestling with this since June. As I previously stated, since the end of June, I believed I was in complete and grave danger every moment of her life that she was living with her mother. And the other things that I had tried to do to save her from that were not working. So I was having this incredible wrestling match within myself for these months, feeling that I needed to do something to save her, and yet feeling this incredible reluctance to do the one thing that I knew would save her because of how terrible I knew it would be to do it, even though I believed it would be right. So by the time October 13th rolled around, I had been grappling with this for a long time, and I was experiencing a tremendous amount of guilt that I had waited as long as I did because I should have acted sooner, and I didn't do that. So I had come to the realization that I had gotten this offer to go on this cruise ship, and I would have been leaving the country for a long time. Essentially, it was now or never. I had an opportunity to save her from a danger that I knew she was in and that I knew was not going to cease. And I just couldn't go on with my life and leave her to drown. I mean, I had a great life. I had everything. I made money doing what I loved. I was going to be going to the South Pacific to play concerts for rich people on cruise ships. I mean, but how could I go and enjoy that and know that I was leaving a kid to her fate, a kid who thought that I was her friend? I would never have been able to look at myself in the mirror again if I had done that. This was not about.
So he uses the magic words now to give the jury a reason to find that this is not murder. Think back to the definition of murder that was given by the defense lawyer in the opening statement that we covered earlier.
Revenge or retribution or anything. I wasn't angry. The only thing I was feeling that day was pity.
And he says he actually prayed about committing this murder.
I had prayed a great deal about this. I had prayed like I'd never prayed before, because even knowing that logically this was the right thing to do, it didn't satisfy that emotional and human aspect where I felt that I needed permission to do this. And I was so terrified that somehow I might be doing the wrong thing. Like I knew that it was right logically, but there's the emotional aspect was just reeling against this idea. And more so because she was a woman. So on that morning, I had prayed earlier, a few days earlier, and I had felt that this was the right thing to do, no matter how terrible and difficult it was going to be.
So after the fact, he says he realized he might get caught because he describes in great detail what happened during the crime. It's frankly all the answers you don't get in most trials. You're always left wondering, but how did this happen? Why did he do that? Why do we have this piece of evidence? Well, he was there and talking, and he explained it all. He explained everything, like the roses, for example, that he came to the front door with flowers and asked for her sister. And the reason for that was he wanted to make sure no one was at home. He knew the daughter was at school, but he wanted to make sure the sister wasn't home either. He thought she wasn't, but wanted to be sure. And then during the course of a very long, prolonged fight, it sounds like, the roses ended up getting scattered around. So it sounded less like posing and rose petals being scattered around and more like something that happened in the frenzy of a fight.
Before I left, when I realized that I had probably left my DNA there, despite my effort not to, I prayed again and just said that I believe that what I've done is the right thing, and I believe that I did it for the right reason. But if it's your will that I be connected to this, then I will turn myself in and I will own up to what I've done, and I'll take responsibility for it because I believed that it was the right thing.
And he said that over and over, the right thing. It was the right thing to do, that the murder was right. He had done what he should do. He also talked about the fact that he, in fact, did turn himself in this sense. He was leaving the country. Now, he knows that people are looking for the killer, Christina Parcell, and he's still leaving the country. So not turned himself in that sense, but he was in Michigan on his way out of the country, I presume, to the cruise ship gig that he had coming up. And he got a call from someone, he didn't say who, that an arrest warrant had been issued for his arrest. And he rented a car and drove all the way back that night to South Carolina to turn himself in. So that is his view of turning himself in.
As soon as I left the house,
And
I
let me go ahead and intro this because I'm going to pull it back here. This is how the day pretty much ended, and it was just an enormous violation. And you are just going to see the pandemonium that kind of erupts. I want you particularly to watch the judge as this happens.
As soon as I left the house, I felt the most enormous wave of relief wash over me because I knew from that moment on I would be safe. Would be safe from the sexual abuse that her mother was perpetrating on her. And there is proof to that the state is hiding from you.
Instruct him to be quiet.
Okay, you need to stop talking. The jury.
The judge is just like, okay, it's been a super, super long day. Let me go ahead and pull that out, and I'll need to stop this over here too, I think. So at that point, when he said, when he said those words, there is proof to that, and the state is hiding from you, that the state is hiding from you. I honestly looked like one of those memes you see from, I was like, no, he did not just say that. He did not just say that in front of the jury. He said, there's proof to that the state is hiding from you. He said it to the jury. He said exactly what she had done. It was a mic drop moment. It does not appear that the state at any point has called for a mistrial. There has to be no question that the state has thought about it and wondered, should we be calling for a mistrial? This has gone so far, but at no point have they. They must really want this trial over with. But in the middle of the day, they ran out and arrested John Mello. They arrested John Mello because of that testimony you heard from Zack Hughes, where Zack Hughes said that John Mello offered him cash, $5,000, and they upped the ante, $10,000 if you will kill Christina Parcell. So they arrested John Mello, and they've accused him of basically attempted murder for hire. That's what he was trying to do, solicit someone to commit a murder. And they may be able to take it further since the murder actually was committed, although not apparently for compensation, at least not according to what Zack Hughes says. It was just, I don't even know what to say. This day was absolutely unbelievable from the beginning until the end. It was just shocking. You had the defendant on the stand confessing, yep, I'm the one who killed her. Yep, look at me, I did it. And then you have his long explanations of why. You have the story of his sister, Grace, the confusion and the intermixing of Grace and his sister that just became almost disturbing. Like, why is this so intertwined? It was almost like, well, I don't even want to go there. I'm no psychiatrist, but wow, it was really disturbing. And then you have the detailed description of the murder and exactly what he did. And it was horrendous. And I've left out the detail on that. You can go back and watch it if you want to on the feed, but wow. And you've got repeated statements to the jury that got out the fact he wanted the jury to hear. He is looking for jury nullification. best possible result for him would have been if the judge allowed in all of the evidence of CSAM related to Christina Parcell and related to her boyfriend, fiance, Bradley Post. But the judge said no. The judge didn't let that in. So they were left trying to just throw out these little hints. That's what he did, just to try to make sure the jury knew about it. That's all he has. And so he wanted them to have these little points. And I realize how incredibly tempting it is to think she's a terrible, terrible person. And what she did to this child is so awful. It had to be stopped. I don't disagree that it was terrible and that it had to be stopped. If in fact that's what the photographs show, wow, that's appalling. But we have a rule of law for a reason. We have a rule of law because we believe that there have to be levels of proof, that people have to actually be given the opportunity for a trial. And Christina did not get that. Instead, Zack Hughes appointed himself as the judge and the jury, the sole prosecutor. He appointed himself in charge of this. And imagine the chaos that would ensue if every time someone believed someone else deserved great punishment, had to be stopped, they could then choose voluntarily, solely by themselves to kill somebody. That's incredibly dangerous. And that makes someone a menace. That makes someone a great danger, a grave danger to our society, because now we don't know who they're going to decide next would fit into that category. And that's why we have these rules that prevent that sort of thing. And that's why the judges made the ruling that he did. He's trying to prevent that. But at the same time, I do understand how seriously wronged this little girl was. This is appalling. I mean, just absolutely appalling. And that he complained and sent things and asked for help. And apparently the guardian ad litem would say that because she was about to recommend that Christina Parcell get complete custody because the little girl seemed to be, quote, thriving, and that the custody be removed from Mello entirely because he was just a real jerk with her and seemed like a really difficult person. So she was about to recommend the switch of custody. And instead, when she saw those photographs, she was appalled. We didn't hear that. We just heard a summary of that testimony, or at least the court was told a summary of that. So I am really curious. What do you think about this? This is hard case. I mean, what do you think? Give me a 1 if you think Zachary Hughes was justified in what he did, a 2 if you think, no, you can't do this. This is not acceptable in our society. So 1 means justified, 2 means not justified. The jury is going to have an absolute, it's going to be amazing when they get this trial. And I'm assuming that there's not going to be a request for a hung jury. And I'm assuming that, I'm sorry, not for a hung jury, for a mistrial, because there hasn't been a request so far. It doesn't seem like anybody has asked for that. The murder details will just creep you out if you go back and listen to them. And at the end, remember we talked about that strange smell that was over everything? It was what is that smell? No one can figure it out. Well, he says he washed her hands in paint thinner because he was afraid maybe he'd left some DNA and he thought that would be a way to get rid of the DNA. Obviously, it didn't work. They found his DNA under her fingernails. So he said he threw the gun and knife into a lake, burned his clothes in a fire pit. And so are they going to ask for a mistrial? It doesn't seem like the judge told the jury, see you tomorrow. He let them out early. I think that they had very little testimony relative to the entire day, but it's just been such a difficult case for the judge and for the lawyers. It's been absolutely crazy. So I'm looking through and I'm seeing a lot of 2s, a 3. That's probably, I don't know, not justified, but mitigating factors. And maybe it would play into, well, who knows? Maybe it would play into sentencing or something. Probably not. Probably there would be a mandatory on this, but I'm not sure. I don't know the South Carolina rule on that. I see lots of 1s. I see lots of 2s. It's a hard case. I see probably more 2s, but I see a whole bunch. I need to say thank you to Voodoo Vicky. We have a couple new members, ST Winter and EMI. Frocky has been a member for 9 months. That's awesome. Mama Pinks says a shout out and happy birthday to Camilla. Happy birthday, Camilla Juliana. And Mildred Mildred had some views about the defendant, and certainly he definitely seemed to have real confidence in being able to make the decision about Christina Parcell, to feel really confident that he had made the decision about what should happen, and he was entitled to do that, and therefore he acted on it. Shards of Word says, don't forget to hit that like button. Yes, I forgot to say that, but please do hit the like button. That'll really help the video, and I'd appreciate it. Also, subscribe. We'd love to have you back for more. And My 2 Cents Y'all says, what did CPS have to say if he did report it? I presume not much. He did not have the photographs that were later available after the investigation into her murder began. Only then did they find the photographs in Bradley Post's possession. And he had a clone of Christina Parcell's phone. So he had both her phone and his because he had that clone. And therefore, they were able to see all of those photographs and they were able to look at that. The defendant, Zachary Hughes, wouldn't have had that. He didn't have that available to him. So I don't know that he had enough evidence. He may just have said, we think, and the things he mentioned were that the little girl seemed clearly sad and like she was getting less happy. And it was more things like that. And it seemed to be less of a certainty about what we now know about. I'm not sure. He says he was right. And in the end he was, but there may not have been knowledge of that was available to him right then. So we are still going to be having our members only live stream. We are going to be writing the world's first YouTube community true crime novel. But I've been trying to figure out, okay, how exactly do I do this? If we have, because it's going to be just the members, and even that is going to be hard to manage and figure out. So I think what I'm going to do, we're going to write just like a little short story or something first, so I can kind of see how we're going to do it. And so I'll be announcing that first, and then we're going to start we may do some chapters, maybe one chapter at a time. I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but it's going to be unbelievably fun. So if you're not a member, we'd love for you to join. Now you can subscribe for absolutely free, but if you hit the join button, we'd also love that. MB has been a member for 2 months. We're pretrial motions to exclude accusations. There were motions in advance to keep out any evidence related to the CSAM and related to those sorts of issues against the victim, Christina Parcell, or her boyfriend, fiance. Shirosite Zena says she's going to call this the judge's bad day. Really bad, horrible, whatever it was day. Yeah, it was a really bad day for the judge. It was just absolutely brutal. So I fully agree with you. Well, I will see y'all Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I've got so much to cover. I may even be dropping another video or maybe going live tomorrow. But I will see y'all for sure on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern.